I'm Miguel Arias and I'm a truck driver. I'm a man hardened by asphalt and sleepless nights. I've traveled every corner of this country, from the icy highways of the north to the dusty roads of the south. In all my years behind the wheel, I've seen storms, floods, and terrible accidents. Nothing scares me, or at least that's what I thought. I was never one to believe in ghosts or urban legends. For me, everything had a logical explanation. Strange noises were just the wind, mysterious shadows were the product of fatigue, and stories of apparitions were simply the inventions of people with a very strong imagination. I never saw anything, but that night was different. The feeling of unease that invaded me was something I'd never experienced before. The figure I saw in the rearview mirror, that shadow that vanished into thin air, couldn't have been a product of my imagination. It was all too real. This route through the San Luis Mountains always had a somewhat strange reputation. Truckers tell stories of unexplained accidents, of lights that appear and disappear in the darkness, balls of fire, figures that cross the road and then vanish. I always thought these were tales to scare novices, but now I doubt it. Legends aside, this route always seemed peaceful to me. Miles and miles of hillside, hills and forests. No towns or cities in sight, just silence and darkness. But tonight the silence was different. A somewhat unsettling silence, filled with tension, with the radio static that made you feel uneasy. You thought something was going to happen. Suddenly, I decided to continue without stopping and without making any suggestions. I'd gathered so much information I'd heard about the route. I couldn't stay in the middle of nowhere waiting for the darkness to devour me. But as I continued, the feeling that I wasn't alone intensified. I felt a presence beside me, something watching me from the darkness, something following me. Fear invaded me in many ways, and I don't know why, but I tried to remain calm. I couldn't let panic take over. I had to reach my destination. I had to deliver the load, but something told me that fate had other plans for me tonight. As I drove along a deserted road that disappears between mountains and cliffs, the moonlight was illuminating my trailer. After all, I had no reason to be afraid. I've always been a man hardened by years of long trips and sleepless nights. That's what I was thinking. Every mile traveled was a story added to the burden of my life. Tonight the pressure is greater. I have to deliver an urgent load before dawn reaches the horizon. The truck's radio emits a constant murmur of static, a backdrop that accompanies my loneliness. The silence in the cab is overwhelming and suffocating. As the night progresses, I feel fatigue weighing more heavily on my eyelids, but responsibility keeps me alert so I don't fall asleep. However, as I continue forward, the monotonous rhythm of the wheel on the asphalt seems to set a disturbing beat. Suddenly, a flicker of the truck's lights pulls me from my thoughts. Glancing in the rearview mirror, my heart stops. I see a dark figure motionless in the middle of the road. It's something that shouldn't be there, and in an instant, I'm faced with the decision to turn or continue. With a sharp movement, I turn my head and there's nothing. Only the desolation of the mountain and the calm of the night that was already beginning to overwhelm my tired senses. It's sleep, I think, and I decide to ignore whatever it was, labeling the vision as a product of my accumulated fatigue. But when I gaze at the pearl silver of the moon, a strange feeling stirs inside me. The attention was eating me up inside, I swear. Every shadow, every engine noise was becoming an invisible threat. I needed a respite, even if it was brief. In the distance, I could see a small food stand on the side of the road. It looked abandoned, with the windows covered and the paintings barely visible, probably once bright, inviting travelers to stop and eat. I thought there was no service at that hour, although I didn't. It was already so late. I'd stopped at places like this before, on the side of the road, to eat something or take care of something, but this time I just wanted to keep going because I was so nervous. However, flashing lights flickered faintly inside, and the smell of freshly cooked food made my stomach churn. Somehow, hunger made me do something reckless. "It's just hunger, it's just my nerves," I muttered. Whether to stop or keep going, I stopped the truck and parked a few meters ahead. I got out with the intention of I had something to eat before continuing, as the smell seemed delicious, so I went inside. The interior was dusty and messy, but a table at the back was lit by a dim lamp. And there, sitting, an old man with a wrinkled face and hollow eyes was looking at me with an expression of profound sadness. In the background he was smoking something. It was meat sandwiches, apparently. That was the smell I could smell, and it had made me hungry. "What are you doing here, young man?" the old man asked, his voice trembling, as if every word cost him a superhuman effort. "I just wanted a coffee and some of that meat you have roasting for dinner. Bandage me some. I want to rest for a moment." "It's been a tiring night," I replied, sensing something very strange about that whole place. The old man shook his head slowly. "I shouldn't be here." No one should be here after midnight. Why? I asked, intrigued and at the same time fearful of the answer. They're waiting for you, he said, his voice trembling. The night walkers, lost souls who wander the route, are always looking for company in their eternal solitude. They feed on fear and despair. If they find you, they'll drag you with them into the darkness. Down there in the ravines, you'd better change your route. But before I could do anything else or ask him why he was saying that, a mysterious, fat woman with a bad expression emerged from the depths. He told me everything was closed and that it was best if I left because he was already cleaning up to leave. That meat they were grilling was his dinner, and he had nothing to offer me. The truth is even my hunger had gone. The woman simply lifted the old man's arm and reluctantly led him into a back room where I could see more people who seemed to be gathered. That calmed me down a bit, but the story the woman told me, claiming that her grandfather, the old man who welcomed me, told it to visitors to get some pesos so he could drink his cheap liquor, since he was always drunk. Don't pay attention to her, she always tells the same story. She says that many years ago a group of miners were traveling. Along this route, a storm surprised them and their wagon overturned. They sought shelter, entered a ravine but got lost. Thirst and hunger consumed them and one by one their souls fell, trapped in these mountains. They've turned them into night walkers. Sometimes you see them wandering along the road, waiting for lost travelers so they won't be alone in their eternal suffering. And look at you, here you are. Almost no one travels this road at night even though there's a highway. I don't know why you're here. Just like you, many people stray and don't even realize it. I felt the ground shake under my feet as I heard this peculiar story, but it was somehow true, and I didn't know why I was on the highway. A brief thought of getting there faster made me take a less traveled road. I had entered through an intersection, but I'd been driving for a long time and didn't seem to be making any progress. Something had caused me to stray and I felt trapped in a bad dream. I was just thankful to get there as quickly as possible. Outside, the trailer seemed intact, but something was wrong. There were footprints surrounding the vehicle as if someone had been watching it, footprints that hadn't been there when I'd entered. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Night walkers, it wasn't possible, maybe it was just my imagination. I just got in the truck, closed the door and drove off. I had to get out of there, I had to get away from this nightmare. But as I continued down the road, I felt like the footprints were following me. They were invisible, but they were present, and in the darkness I could see shadows moving. Figures were moving, slipping through the woods, watching me with a pair of glowing eyes. The truck devoured miles of asphalt, but the feeling that something was following me, something invisible and sinister, didn't go away. The shadows of the mountains seemed to come to life, lengthening and twisting their hands toward the vehicle. No one was there, no companion, no radio signal, nothing, and the road, once so familiar, had become a labyrinth of nightmares, completely unfamiliar. I began to notice more things. The traffic signs were strangely upside down, as if someone had turned them in a macabre game. The truck's lights flickered on and off for seconds, plunging me into absolute darkness. The silence, once merely unsettling, was now true terror, charged with an unbearable tension that made me clench my teeth and grip the steering wheel. Suddenly, a figure dressed in white appeared in the middle of the road, silhouetted against the darkness. A human figure, but spectral, as if made of nothing but fog. I braked. Abruptly, the truck screeched to a halt. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest and I moved forward slowly, but the figure had disappeared. There was no trace of it, not even a trace of dust. A cold, paralyzing fear began to slow my thoughts. Were these night walkers real? I was losing my mind. I decided to continue, hoping it was all a figment of my imagination, but the nightmare wasn't over. Minutes later, I heard dull thuds from the back of the truck, as if someone had tried to break in. Panic gripped me at that moment. Who wouldn't? What was out there? I braked again and the truck stopped in the middle of the road. With trembling hands, I grabbed the flashlight and went out to check the cargo door. It was open and it was impossible. I thought someone had tried to steal my cargo or something, but the seals were intact. I didn't understand how that had happened. I felt something was inside, among the cargo. I didn't hesitate to shine my light and ask, "Is anyone there?" Did I ask? With a trembling voice. Silence was the only response, but I felt a somewhat invisible presence watching me from the back. Then I noticed a couple of flashes peeking out from the back and I decided not to go in. I couldn't face what was lurking in there. I knew it was bad. The energy emanating from that place told me so. I slammed the door shut and secured it with invisible, relentless bolts, and the darkness emanating from inside the trailer, was chasing me. The truck's engine seemed to be suffering too. It was roaring, but the sound kept stopping, drowning in the vastness. The vehicle's lights barely illuminated the road intermittently, but beyond there was only darkness. Ever since I left that cursed post, something hasn't stopped disturbing me. Shadows seem to move at the edges of my vision. The air inside the cabin has become colder than usual, as if someone invisible were with me. Suddenly I feel a chill run down my spine. Something isn't right. I look at the passenger seat and there sits a man barely visible. I don't know how he got there or how long. He's been sitting there for a while. I almost scream in fear, but I try to stay calm. I can't take my eyes off the road. I focus and try to overcome the fear. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I see him raise a hand and point ahead toward the road. My eyes follow his direction and there he is. An overturned truck in the middle, lights flashing, debris scattered everywhere. There's a fire and other wrecked vehicles. I brake sharply and he stops just in time. I turn my head. I turn toward the passenger seat, but the presence is gone. However, in the rearview mirror, I see it standing in the middle of the road, staring at me. As it recedes, it slowly fades into the darkness, but its presence is still there in my mind, in my chest. I don't know who it was or what it wanted, but it wasn't human. The accident was horrific. Many people dead, much damage. I try to help, as there are people there waiting for emergency services. One of the survivors of the crash says he saw a tall person flying. On the highway, this caused him to swerve and go off the road. He survived, but many of those who saw these presences did not. The overturned trailer was carrying flammable liquids, which started the fire. They couldn't explain what they had seen, attributing it to fatigue, but I knew it had been the walkers. Finally, I reached my destination. The truck's lights illuminated the deteriorated facade and the wind whistled through the cracks in the walls. I cautiously got out of the vehicle, feeling the weight of the night on my shoulders. Something isn't right here, but I have no choice. I need to unload the cargo and get out of this place as soon as possible. There were some workers who immediately began unloading, and when I told them about the situation, they became thoughtful and affirmed that it wasn't the first time they'd heard something like this. They knew the rumors about the walkers and claimed that they really did cause accidents and spy on the roads. I had been quite lucky. When I finally dropped off the cargo and started back, a shiver reminded me of the footprints surrounding me. And how many have followed that route and gotten lost in the mystery of the wayfarers? The thought of their souls lurking in the darkness drags me into the abyss of unease. I knew I would never again cross the boundaries of that unpaved road, not even for a second. We are told that roads are simply paths, but that night I learned that not everything that seems deserted is deceptive. There are secrets that whisper of danger, and sometimes it's better to heed them.